"Ma'am, our private collection starts at $10,000. Claire Whitmore said it with the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile at all, the kind designed to embarrass someone quietly in public without ever raising its voice. The words floated through the marble showroom of Maison Étoile on Rodeo Drive just after 6:40 p.m. on a warm Thursday night in Beverly Hills, and the effect was immediate. Conversations softened. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Two women near the jewelry counter glanced toward the entrance with identical expressions, curiosity mixed with judgment. Naomi Carter stood still beneath the soft gold lighting of the boutique, one hand resting lightly on the strap of a plain leather tote bag, her face calm enough to make the tension around her feel louder. She wore dark jeans, clean white sneakers, and a fitted black t-shirt under a lightweight camel coat. No diamonds, no designer logos, no assistant trailing behind her carrying shopping bags. Nothing about her matched the image Claire believed belonged inside Maison Étoile, one of the most exclusive luxury fashion brands in America. And Claire made sure everyone in the store understood that within the first 10 seconds. "I'm aware," Naomi replied evenly, her voice low and smooth, carrying the kind of confidence that didn't ask permission to exist. Claire tilted her head slightly, as if speaking to a child who had wandered into the wrong classroom. "Then perhaps our accessories floor downstairs would be more comfortable for you." The insult landed softly, wrapped in polished customer service language, but the meaning behind it cut clean through the room. A man in a navy blazer near the watches smirked into his champagne glass. One sales associate looked down immediately, pretending to rearrange scarves she had already folded twice. Another employee glanced toward the security guard station near the front entrance. Naomi noticed all of it. She always noticed. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe." These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Naomi Carter. The boutique smelled faintly of white orchids and leather polish, the kind of carefully engineered luxury scent designed to make wealthy customers feel important before they even touched a product. Soft piano music drifted through hidden speakers overhead. Every detail in Maison Étoile had been curated to communicate exclusivity. But Naomi understood something Claire didn't. Luxury stores rarely sold products first. They sold permission. Permission to belong. Permission to enter certain spaces. Permission to feel worthy of being seen. And Claire Whitmore had already decided Naomi hadn't earned that permission. "I'm looking for the Atelier Noir collection," Naomi said calmly. Claire's expression barely changed, but something colder entered her eyes. "That collection requires pre-approved clientele." Naomi nodded once, almost thoughtfully. "Does it?" Claire folded her hands in front of her designer blazer. "Most clients who shop Atelier Noir schedule appointments weeks in advance." The security guard near the entrance shifted subtly now, not close enough to intervene, just close enough to remind Naomi that she was being watched. It was practiced, controlled, invisible if you weren't looking for it. Naomi had seen versions of this moment her entire life. At 16, she'd been followed through a department store in downtown Chicago while shopping for a homecoming dress with her mother. At 24, a realtor had once handed her apartment brochures for neighborhoods she never asked to see. At 31, a hotel concierge in Manhattan had mistaken her for housekeeping while she was speaking at a tech conference upstairs. Different cities, different people, same look in their eyes every single time. The look that quietly asked, "How did you get in here?" Claire stepped behind the glass display counter and picked up a black crocodile leather handbag with white gloves. "This piece alone is $12,800, she explained carefully. "I'd hate for there to be any confusion before we begin." The sentence was smooth enough to sound professional, but several customers nearby exchanged glances immediately. Even they heard it. Naomi looked at the handbag briefly before meeting Claire's eyes again. "You assume I can't afford it?" Claire gave a soft laugh that carried no warmth whatsoever. "I assume our brand attracts a very specific clientele." Silence spread across the showroom like spilled ink. Somewhere near the fitting rooms, a sales associate stopped steaming a garment mid-motion. Naomi remained perfectly still, but the air around her changed. Not louder, heavier, like a storm quietly deciding where it wanted to land. Then a young junior associate named Madison Lee looked up suddenly from the register terminal near the back wall. Her eyes narrowed at the computer screen in front of her. She looked at Naomi once, then back at the screen. Her face lost color almost instantly. "Claire," she whispered carefully. "I think." Claire cut her off without turning around. "Not now." Madison swallowed hard. Naomi noticed that too. The boutique lighting reflected softly against the marble floor as another couple entered through the front doors laughing quietly, completely unaware that the atmosphere inside had already shifted into something sharp enough to cut glass. Claire returned the handbag to its display shelf with exaggerated care before looking back at Naomi one more time. "Maison Étoile protects its image very seriously," she said. "We can usually tell within moments who belongs here." Naomi stared at her silently for 2 full seconds. No anger, no raised voice, just stillness, the kind that made confident people suddenly uncertain. Then she finally spoke. "That's interesting," she said quietly. "Because by tomorrow morning," her eyes moved slowly across the showroom, across the employees, the customers, the polished walls carrying the company's gold emblem high above them all. "This brand may have a very different idea of what belonging looks like." Claire Whitmore held Naomi Carter's gaze for another second too long, the kind of stare people used when they believed silence itself could establish hierarchy. Around them, Maison Étoile continued pretending to function normally. A woman near the shoe display slowly slipped her phone from her purse beneath the counter edge. A sales associate carrying sparkling water trays paused halfway across the showroom before changing direction entirely. Even the piano music overhead suddenly felt artificial now, like the building itself was trying too hard to maintain elegance, while tension quietly spread through the marble floors beneath it. Naomi stood calmly in the center of it all, her posture relaxed, her expression unreadable. That calmness unsettled Claire more than anger would have. Angry customers could be dismissed. Calm ones were dangerous. "Madison," Claire said sharply without taking her eyes off Naomi, "help the guests near the fitting rooms." Madison Lee hesitated beside the register terminal, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. The screen in front of her still displayed the internal corporate calendar linked to investor relations. Naomi Carter. Acquisition dinner. Executive clearance level. Priority access. Madison had reread the name 3 times, already hoping she was mistaken, but the profile photo confirmed it. Same eyes, same face, same woman standing 20 feet away being treated like an inconvenience in a company preparing to negotiate directly with her within the next 48 hours. "Claire," Madison whispered again carefully, "I really think we should now." Claire's voice cracked through the showroom like a snapped thread. Madison lowered her eyes immediately and stepped away from the register, but not before glancing once more toward Naomi with visible concern. Naomi noticed that too. She noticed everything. A middle-aged white couple entered through the boutique's glass doors carrying shopping bags from Cartier and Saint Laurent. The husband slowed immediately when he sensed the atmosphere inside. His wife leaned toward him quietly. "What is happening?" she murmured. "Probably someone causing problems," he replied under his breath. Claire heard the exchange and straightened slightly, reassured by the assumption already forming in strangers' minds. That was how spaces like Maison Étoile protected themselves. Nobody had to say the ugly part out loud anymore. The room did it automatically. "As I explained," Claire continued smoothly, "Atelier Noir pieces are reserved for established clients with verified purchase histories." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "You mean clients who look the part?" Claire folded her arms carefully. "I mean clients familiar with our standards." Naomi almost smiled at that. Standards. Such a polished word for exclusion. Near the fragrance counter, one associate quietly avoided eye contact altogether while another employee named Brittany leaned toward a coworker and whispered, "She walked in like she owns the place." The other woman gave a short, nervous laugh. "People always do." Naomi slowly removed her phone from her coat pocket and glanced briefly at the screen. No panic, no frustration, just a quick, unreadable message before sliding it away again. Claire noticed the movement immediately. "If you are planning to record inside the boutique," she said sharply, "that violates store policy." "Interesting," Naomi replied softly. "Because humiliation seems fully permitted." The sentence landed harder than Claire expected. One customer looked down instantly. Another shifted uncomfortably beside the jewelry cases. Somewhere near the entrance, The security guard adjusted his earpiece and took another subtle step closer. He was tall, broad-shouldered, early 40s maybe, wearing the same black tailored suit as every other luxury retail security employee in Beverly Hills. His name tag read Daniel Mercer. Naomi glanced at it once before returning her attention to Claire. Daniel had not spoken yet, but his presence alone was already part of the performance. "I think it is best if we redirect you downstairs," Claire continued, her tone tightening now that the room's attention had fully settled on them. "Our entry-level accessories are more accessible." Accessible. Another polished insult wrapped in customer service language. Naomi exhaled slowly through her nose. At 22, during her first year building software contracts out of a tiny shared office in Chicago, a venture capitalist had once asked if she was the assistant bringing coffee for the meeting. At 28, after closing a multi-million-dollar deal, she had walked into a luxury watch store wearing sneakers and been ignored for 40 straight minutes while employees helped white customers who arrived after her. She remembered every single moment clearly, not because the incidents themselves were unique, but because the pattern never changed. Different clothes, different buildings, same assumptions. Claire stepped toward the glass counter again and unlocked another display case. This time she removed a cream-colored handbag stitched with gold hardware and held it carefully beneath the showroom lights. "This is one of our signature pieces," she explained loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. "Very limited. Very exclusive." Naomi looked at the bag briefly. "How much?" Claire gave a faint smile. $18,400 before tax. A younger man browsing belts nearby let out a quiet whistle under his breath. Claire heard it and seemed pleased by the reaction. Naomi nodded once. "I will take two." Silence. Real silence this time. The kind that arrived so suddenly the entire showroom seemed to inhale together. Brittany looked up sharply from across the floor. Madison froze near the fitting rooms. Even Daniel shifted slightly near the entrance. Claire blinked once before recovering. "Excuse me." Naomi reached calmly into her tote bag and pulled out a slim black card holder. "Two of them," she repeated evenly. "Gift wrap both." Claire did not move. Her eyes dropped slowly toward Naomi's plain black t-shirt, then toward the jeans, the sneakers, the unbranded coat. She looked back up again with visible disbelief. "Those bags are nearly $40,000 combined." Naomi's expression never changed. "I can do math." The tension inside Maison Étoile sharpened instantly. Somewhere behind the walls, hidden speakers continued playing soft piano music while the entire showroom quietly waited to see who would blink first. Claire Whitmore did not reach for the gift wrapping station. She did not call another associate for assistance. She simply stared at Naomi Carter for a long moment, as if the request itself had violated some invisible law inside Maison Étoile. Around them, the boutique had gone unnaturally quiet. The customers pretending not to watch were now openly listening. Even the sound of heels against marble from the second-floor balcony had faded. Naomi remained calm beneath the warm showroom lights, one hand resting lightly against the glass counter, while Claire tried to process the possibility that the woman she had already dismissed might actually be capable of spending more money in 10 seconds than most clients spent in an entire year. "I will need to verify payment first," Claire finally said, her voice tighter now. Naomi gave a small nod. "Of course." Claire extended her hand toward the black card holder, but her expression still carried disbelief rather than professionalism. Naomi handed over a matte black card without explanation. No visible bank logo. No embossed numbers on the front. Just her name in silver lettering. Claire looked at it briefly and frowned. "What kind of card is this?" "One that works," Naomi replied. A younger customer near the fragrance display quietly smirked while pretending to browse perfume bottles. Another woman folded her arms and whispered to her friend, "This is getting uncomfortable." Claire ignored them both. "Maison Étoile does not process anonymous payment methods," she said. "You may need to provide additional identification." Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly for the first time all evening. Not anger. Recognition. She had heard versions of that sentence before too. Additional verification. Additional review. Additional screening. Somehow the rules always became more complicated the moment people like her entered certain rooms. Claire handed the card toward Brittany instead of taking it to the register herself. "Run this manually," she instructed loudly. Brittany accepted the card carefully, But Naomi noticed the hesitation immediately. The girl looked nervous now. Not cruel. Nervous. There was a difference. Brittany disappeared behind the main register counter, while Madison stood frozen nearby, pretending to reorganize receipts that did not need organizing. Her eyes kept drifting toward Naomi, then toward Claire, then back toward the corporate profile still open inside the internal system. Naomi could almost see the panic building behind the young associate's face. Daniel Mercer slowly approached from the front entrance now, not aggressively, just close enough to make his role visible. Everything all right over here? He asked calmly. Claire gave a short laugh that sounded forced. Just a payment issue. Payment issue. The phrase floated through the boutique, carefully crafted to suggest suspicion without directly accusing anyone. Naomi glanced briefly at Daniel. Interesting how quickly expensive stores assume criminal activity when a black woman starts shopping comfortably. Claire crossed her arms immediately. Nobody said that. You did not have to. Silence hit again. Sharp this time. A silver-haired customer near the scarf display slowly lowered the reading glasses perched on her nose. Another man browsing leather jackets shifted awkwardly and stepped farther away, as if tension itself had become contagious. Then Brittany returned from the register holding the black card carefully between two fingers. It declined, she said quietly. Claire's confidence returned instantly, like oxygen rushing back into a room. I see. Naomi did not react immediately. She simply looked at Brittany. Run it again. Brittany hesitated. I already tried twice. Then you typed something incorrectly. Claire's expression hardened. Our systems are accurate. Naomi almost smiled at that. Systems usually reflect the people operating them. Madison inhaled sharply near the register. She knew exactly what had happened because she had watched Brittany freeze halfway through the transaction after seeing the account authorization level flash across the screen. Instead of completing the purchase, Brittany had canceled it herself and restarted the process incorrectly out of panic. Not because the card failed, because the limit attached to it terrified her. Claire leaned forward slightly now, lowering her voice while still making sure nearby customers could hear every word. If payment is going to be an issue, I must ask you not to handle the merchandise. There it was. No more polished language now. The room shifted immediately. Naomi slowly rested both hands on the counter and looked directly at Claire. You assumed I could not afford the bags before I spoke. You redirected me downstairs before I touched anything. You called security before I even completed a purchase. And now suddenly the payment system fails after one swipe. Claire's jaw tightened. You are making accusations. No, Naomi replied calmly. I am making observations. Daniel stepped slightly closer to the counter. Not threatening. Just visible enough to reinforce the pressure surrounding Naomi from every direction. Across the boutique floor, two women quietly lifted their phones. One began typing rapidly into a group chat while the other angled. Her camera low enough to avoid attention. Maison Étoile had become a theater now, and everyone inside understood it. Brittany looked increasingly uncomfortable beside the register. Maybe we should just try another terminal, she whispered. Claire snapped her head toward her immediately. The terminal is not the problem. Naomi caught that too. The sentence arrived too fast. Too defensive. Madison finally stepped forward before she could stop herself. Claire, she said carefully, her voice trembling. The authorization code on that account is executive level. Claire's face changed instantly. Just for a second. But Naomi saw it. Fear. Real fear. Claire recovered quickly and laughed softly. Executive-level accounts do not walk in wearing sneakers. The words hung in the air like broken glass. Several customers visibly winced. Daniel looked down briefly. Even Brittany seemed stunned Claire had said it out loud. Naomi remained perfectly still beneath the showroom lights. Then she leaned slightly closer across the counter, her voice low enough to force everyone nearby into silence just to hear it. You keep confusing wealth with costume, she said quietly. That mistake is about to become very expensive for you. The silence after Naomi Carter's last sentence felt heavier than the marble beneath everyone's feet. Nobody moved immediately. Nobody even pretended to shop anymore. Maison Étoile had transformed completely in less than 20 minutes. What had started as quiet luxury now felt like a courtroom wrapped in designer lighting. Claire Whitmore stood frozen behind the glass counter, arms crossed too tightly, jaw locked hard enough to betray the confidence she was trying desperately to maintain. Naomi remained calm across from her, one hand resting beside the untouched handbag display, while the soft piano music overhead suddenly sounded painfully out of place. Madison Lee looked like she wanted to disappear entirely. The young associate stood near the register terminal, gripping a tablet against her chest, her eyes darting nervously between Naomi and Claire. She understood something now that nobody else inside the boutique fully understood yet. This was no longer about a purchase. The moment had already become bigger than the bags, the transaction, or the showroom itself. Madison, Claire said sharply without looking at her. Go assist someone useful. Madison swallowed hard. Claire, I really think we should contact regional before this escalates. Claire spun toward her immediately. Escalates, she repeated with a cold laugh. A decline card in a difficult customer is not escalation. Naomi's eyes shifted slowly toward Madison. Difficult, she repeated quietly. That word always arrives right after confidence does. One customer near the sunglasses wall lowered his phone slightly and whispered, She is right. His wife nodded without taking her eyes off Claire. Brittany pretended to reorganize shopping bags behind the counter, but her hands shook visibly now. Daniel Mercer remained near the entrance, posture rigid, caught somewhere between protocol and discomfort. He had worked luxury retail security for 11 years across Beverly Hills and Manhattan, and he recognized the atmosphere forming inside the boutique. The dangerous part was never when people yelled. It was when the room started choosing sides quietly. Madison finally stepped forward despite Claire's glare. The card did not actually fail, she admitted softly. The sentence sliced through the boutique instantly. Brittany looked up in panic. Claire's face drained of color for half a second before hardening again. Excuse me. Madison looked terrified now, but she continued anyway. The authorization request triggered executive clearance review. The system flagged it because the account limit exceeded manual approval thresholds. Real silence hit the room. Even the customers filming lowered their phones slightly just to hear better. Naomi did not speak. She simply watched Claire carefully, the same way someone watches a crack slowly spread across glass. Brittany's voice came out barely above a whisper. I thought the terminal malfunctioned. Claire turned toward her sharply. You thought wrong. Madison inhaled slowly. No, I saw the screen. Claire stepped around the counter now, heels striking the marble floor with controlled precision. You are a junior associate, she said coldly. You do not understand executive transactions. Madison's voice trembled, but she held her ground. I understand that her profile is linked directly to investor relations. Several customers exchanged looks immediately. One woman near the fragrance display muttered, Investor relations? Daniel glanced toward Naomi for the first time with genuine uncertainty crossing his face. Naomi remained perfectly composed. Claire forced a laugh that sounded thinner now. Corporate investors do not wander Rodeo Drive dressed like tourists. Naomi tilted her head slightly. And there it is again. Claire folded her arms. What? The belief that wealth has a uniform. The words settled over the room slowly. Madison looked down at the tablet in her hands before finally saying the sentence she had clearly been trying to avoid for the last 10 minutes. Her name is already in the system for tomorrow night's acquisition dinner. Nobody moved. The boutique lights reflected softly against polished glass cases while every person inside processed the word acquisition. Brittany blinked twice. Daniel straightened near the entrance. Even the silver-haired woman near the scarves lowered her phone entirely now. Claire's expression hardened instantly. You are confused. Madison shook her head carefully. No, I am not. Claire stepped closer. Enough. But Madison kept going. Fear had already crossed the line into conviction now. The profile says Naomi Carter is meeting with senior ownership regarding controlling investment negotiations. A younger customer near the watches whispered, Oh my God. Naomi finally looked directly at Madison. Thank you. Madison gave a small, nervous nod, relief and panic colliding across her face simultaneously. Claire recovered quickly, but the damage had already spread through the room like smoke. Even if that were true, she snapped, it proves nothing. Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. Interesting. Claire lifted her chin defiantly. People exaggerate connections to luxury brands all the time. Naomi almost smiled again. And people like you mistake power for appearance all the time. Daniel shifted awkwardly beside the entrance. His entire posture had changed now. He was no longer standing there to intimidate Naomi. He was standing there trying to understand whether the situation unfolding in front of him could cost people their careers by sunrise. Brittany quietly stepped backward from the register counter as though distance alone might protect her from whatever was coming next. One customer slowly murmured, "This place is about to implode." Claire heard that too. Her composure cracked for the first time all evening. "You are turning this store into a spectacle," she said sharply toward Naomi. Naomi looked around the showroom slowly. At the customers holding phones. At the employees avoiding eye contact. At Madison standing alone despite doing the right thing. At Claire still clinging desperately to authority built entirely on assumption. Then Naomi spoke softly enough to force the entire room into silence again. "No," she said. "I am simply letting everyone see what was already here." Claire Whitmore's composure fractured slowly after that. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just small cracks appearing one at a time beneath the polished confidence she had worn all evening like part of the boutique uniform. The customers saw it immediately. So did the employees. The atmosphere inside Maison Étoile no longer belonged to her. It belonged to the truth hanging quietly in the air between everyone now. Naomi Carter stood calmly beside the glass display cases while the showroom lights reflected softly across the marble floors beneath her sneakers. No raised voice. No threats. Just presence. And somehow that made the tension feel even sharper. Claire forced a tight smile and looked toward Daniel Mercer near the entrance. "I think it is time to escort this guest out," she said coldly. The word guest sounded almost insulting now. Daniel hesitated for the first time all night. Naomi noticed that immediately. Security employees in luxury retail were trained to move quickly when management signaled discomfort. But Daniel was no longer sure who represented the actual threat inside the store. "Claire," he said carefully, "maybe we should contact regional management first." Claire snapped toward him instantly. "I am regional management tonight." Naomi almost smiled at that sentence. The desperation underneath it had finally become visible. Madison still stood near the register gripping the tablet against her chest like a shield. Brittany refused to look at anyone directly now. Several customers openly filmed without hiding their phones anymore. One woman near the jewelry counter whispered, "This is going to end very badly for somebody." Another quietly replied, "It already has." Claire stepped around the counter completely now, heels striking the marble with controlled force as she approached Naomi directly. "You have disrupted the experience of our clientele long enough," she said. "I am asking you to leave the boutique voluntarily." Naomi looked at her evenly. "Or what?" The question landed softly, but it changed the room instantly. Claire folded her arms. "Or we will proceed according to company policy." Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. Company policy. Another phrase she had heard throughout her life right before discrimination disguised itself as procedure. At 14, she remembered standing inside a pharmacy on the south side of Chicago while a cashier quietly followed her down every aisle pretending to rearrange shelves. At 19, a clothing store employee had accused her college roommate of stealing sunglasses before eventually finding them misplaced behind the register. At 27, during a charity gala in Boston, a valet attendant had asked if she was there catering the event, while white guests walked past her without question wearing half the confidence and none of the credentials. The memories came fast now. Not because she wanted them to. Because moments like this always unlocked the others waiting underneath. Different buildings. Same humiliation. Same performance. Claire reached toward Naomi's tote bag suddenly. Not aggressively. Not violently. Just enough to stop her from turning away while speaking. But the contact changed everything. The entire boutique froze. Naomi slowly looked down at Claire's hand resting against the leather strap near her shoulder. Then she looked back up again. Daniel straightened immediately. "Claire," he warned quietly. Madison inhaled sharply beside the register. One customer muttered, "Oh no." Claire removed her hand quickly, but the damage had already settled across the room like smoke. Naomi did not step backward. She did not flinch. She simply stared at Claire for one long, unbearable second while the showroom lights reflected in the glass displays around them. Then she spoke quietly. "You inherited this behavior," she said. "I survived it." Silence. Real silence. Even the music overhead seemed smaller somehow. Claire tried to recover immediately. "Do not twist this into something racial." Naomi almost laughed at that. Not amusement. Exhaustion. That is always the line, she replied softly. You create the pattern. Then you resent being forced to look at it. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck uneasily. The customers filming had moved closer now. One younger woman near the handbags whispered into her phone. She touched her because she thought she could. Brittany finally spoke from behind the counter, her voice trembling. Maybe we should just complete the transaction. Claire spun around instantly. Stay out of this. But nobody could stay out of it anymore. The boutique had already crossed the point where this remained private. Naomi slowly removed her phone from her coat pocket again. Her expression never changed. Calm, precise, controlled. She pressed one button and lifted the phone toward her ear. Claire folded her arms tighter. Calling a lawyer? Naomi looked directly at her. Something much more expensive. The sentence settled heavily across the showroom. Madison's eyes widened immediately. Daniel looked toward the entrance as though considering whether he should leave entirely before whatever came next arrived. Naomi waited calmly while the line connected. Then a woman answered almost instantly on speakerphone. Olivia Grant speaking. Naomi's voice remained smooth and steady. Activate overnight acquisition protocol. Every employee inside Maison Étoile stopped breathing at once. Brittany looked visibly pale now. Madison slowly lowered the tablet from her chest. Even Claire's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Olivia's voice came back calm and professional through the phone speaker. Understood. Legal and investor relations are already assembled. We are prepared to finalize controlling interest authorization within the hour. A customer near the watches whispered, Controlling interest? Naomi kept her eyes locked on Claire. Good, she replied into the phone. And Olivia? Yes, Naomi. Naomi glanced slowly around the boutique at the employees, the customers, the polished walls carrying the gold Maison Étoile branding above them all. Then she spoke quietly enough to force the entire room into silence again. Make sure every camera in this building preserves tonight's footage permanently. The boutique no longer felt luxurious after that phone call. It felt exposed. Every polished surface inside Maison Étoile suddenly reflected something uglier than wealth. Claire Whitmore stood motionless near the display counter while the words controlling interest authorization echoed silently through her mind again and again. Around her, employees avoided eye contact like people trapped inside an elevator they suddenly realized was falling. Naomi Carter remained calm in the center of the showroom, one hand resting lightly against the strap of her tote bag, while customers continued filming openly now. Nobody cared about pretending anymore. The illusion had already cracked. Olivia Grant's voice still lingered faintly through the speakerphone before Naomi lowered the device slowly from her ear. You are bluffing, Claire said finally, but even she did not sound convinced anymore. Naomi looked at her evenly. That is the problem with arrogance, she replied quietly. It mistakes certainty for intelligence. A younger customer near the leather jackets whispered, Oh my God. Another man shook his head slowly while staring at Claire. She really picked the wrong person tonight. Madison Lee remained frozen beside the register, eyes wide, breathing shallow. Brittany had stopped pretending to organize merchandise entirely. Daniel Mercer no longer stood near the entrance like security. He stood there like a witness, trying to calculate how quickly his entire workplace might collapse around him. Claire folded her arms tighter. You expect us to believe you can buy Maison Étoile overnight? Naomi almost smiled. No, she said softly. I expect you to learn how little you understood about the room you were standing in. The sentence landed heavily. Claire opened her mouth again, but before she could respond, the register terminals throughout the boutique emitted a soft, synchronized chime. Every employee looked up instantly. Brittany glanced toward her screen first. Her face lost color almost immediately. Claire, she whispered. Claire turned sharply. What now? Brittany stared at the monitor. Corporate just locked all pending transactions for executive review. Madison checked her own screen beside the register and inhaled sharply. There is an emergency notice from investor relations. Customers leaned closer instinctively. Phones lifted higher. Naomi remained perfectly still. Brittany read slowly from the screen, her voice trembling. Effective immediately, all Maison Étoile locations are entering temporary acquisition transition review, pending overnight board authorization. Real panic flickered across Claire's face now. Not irritation. Not embarrassment. Panic. That is impossible, she snapped. Madison swallowed hard while reading farther down the notice. It says senior stakeholders are assembling remotely right now. Naomi's voice stayed calm. They assembled 20 minutes ago. The room froze again. Somewhere above them, the piano music continued drifting softly through hidden speakers, while the atmosphere underneath it completely collapsed. Claire stepped toward Naomi quickly now, desperation creeping into her posture for the first time all evening. You set this up. Naomi's expression never changed. No, I walked into a luxury store. You came here planning this. Naomi looked slowly around the boutique. At the employees. At the customers. At the phones recording every second. I came here hoping your company had evolved beyond this behavior. Silence hit harder than shouting ever could have. Daniel lowered his eyes briefly. Brittany looked visibly ashamed now. Madison stared at Naomi with something closer to admiration than fear. One older customer near the scarf display quietly murmured. She gave them every chance. Claire's voice sharpened again. This is not racism. This is procedure. Naomi turned toward her fully. Procedure did not follow me through the door. Her voice remained low, but every syllable landed clean. You did. Nobody moved after that. The showroom lights reflected softly across rows of handbags worth more than some people's yearly salaries, while the truth settled deeper into the room with every passing second. Then Naomi's phone vibrated again. She glanced briefly at the screen before answering calmly. Naomi speaking. Olivia Grant returned immediately. The board vote is moving faster than expected. Several shareholders viewed footage from inside the boutique already. Claire's head snapped upward instantly. Naomi listened quietly while customers exchanged looks around her. Olivia continued. Public relations is concerned the clips may leak before opening bell tomorrow morning. Naomi's eyes drifted briefly toward the customers filming nearby. They already have. One younger woman near the jewelry counter slowly lowered her phone, suddenly realizing Naomi had seen her recording the entire time. Olivia exhaled softly through the speaker. Then legal recommends immediate execution tonight. Naomi nodded once. Do it. Claire stepped forward again. You cannot seriously be buying an entire company over one misunderstanding. Naomi looked directly into her eyes. That sentence tells me you still do not understand what happened here. The tension inside Maison Étoile thickened immediately. Customers no longer looked entertained. They looked uncomfortable, reflective, some ashamed. Because beneath the luxury lighting and designer displays, everyone inside the boutique had recognized something familiar tonight. The moment people decided who deserved dignity based entirely on appearance. Naomi slipped her phone slowly back into her pocket. You called security before kindness, she said softly. You questioned payment before offering service. You touched my belongings before respecting my presence. None of that was accidental. Claire's jaw tightened again. You are twisting this. Naomi shook her head once. No, I am removing the excuses. Daniel finally stepped away from the entrance completely. The movement was subtle, but everyone noticed. He was no longer positioning himself between Naomi and the door. He was distancing himself from Claire. Brittany noticed it too and slowly removed her employee earpiece, setting it quietly beside the register, as if the uniform itself had suddenly become heavier to wear. Then every screen inside the boutique flickered simultaneously. One by one, the Maison Étoile logos disappeared from the monitors above the counters before being replaced by a corporate transition notice stamped with a single line in bold black lettering. Pending executive ownership transfer authorization. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed loudly anymore. Naomi looked slowly around the boutique one final time before speaking in the same calm voice she had carried since walking through the doors. Luxury was never your products, she said quietly. It was the illusion that certain people deserved respect more than others. The moment the transition notice appeared across every screen inside Maison Étoile, the boutique stopped feeling like a luxury store entirely. It felt like the final seconds before a storm finally breaks. Nobody moved at first. Employees stood frozen behind counters lined with handbags worth tens of thousands of dollars, while customers held phones suspended in midair, unsure whether they were witnessing a business takeover or a public collapse. Naomi Carter remained calm beneath the soft showroom lighting, her black t-shirt and jeans now carrying more authority in the room than every tailored blazer surrounding her combined. Claire Whitmore stared at the monitors as if refusing to blink might somehow reverse what she was seeing. Pending executive ownership transfer authorization. The sentence glowed across every screen in cold white lettering, while the piano music overhead continued playing with almost cruel elegance. This cannot be happening, Claire whispered finally. Naomi looked at her quietly. It already happened. The sentence landed like a door closing. Brittany slowly stepped away from the register entirely now, placing both hands against the marble counter for balance. Madison Lee remained motionless near the terminal, eyes wide, breathing shallow, caught between fear and vindication. Daniel Mercer stood near the entrance, no longer pretending to monitor Naomi at all. He was watching Claire now. Everyone was. Claire shook her head once and forced herself upright again. You are destroying this company over one interaction. Naomi's expression never changed. No, she replied softly. Your behavior did that long before I walked in. Silence spread through the showroom again. One customer near the fragrance wall slowly murmured, "She is right." Another nodded immediately. This did not start tonight. Claire looked around the boutique, desperately searching for support, but the room had already shifted away from her. Even the people who had quietly agreed with her earlier now looked uncomfortable standing too close to what she represented. Naomi noticed that too. Crowds rarely changed all at once. They changed one conscience at a time. Then Naomi's phone vibrated again. She answered calmly without breaking eye contact with Claire. Naomi speaking. Olivia Grant's voice returned instantly through the speaker. It is done. Every employee inside the boutique froze. Olivia continued. The shareholders approved emergency transfer authority unanimously. By market open tomorrow morning, controlling ownership of Maison Étoile will officially transfer under Carter Global Holdings. The words settled slowly through the room like gravity itself had changed. A customer near the handbags whispered, "Oh my God." Brittany covered her mouth with one hand. Madison looked down at the floor briefly as though overwhelmed by the scale of what she had just witnessed unfold in real time. Claire's face lost all remaining color. Naomi listened quietly while Olivia continued. Public relations is preparing an internal statement. Legal also confirmed that all footage from tonight has been archived permanently. Naomi nodded once. Good. Then Olivia added one final sentence. Congratulations, Naomi. Maison Étoile is yours. Nobody breathed after that. The silence inside the boutique became absolute. Even the soft music overhead seemed to disappear beneath the weight of those words. Naomi slowly lowered the phone from her ear, while Claire stared at her with the expression people wear when reality abandons them faster than pride can adjust. One customer's phone slipped slightly in her hand. Another man near the watches muttered, "She actually bought the company." Naomi finally stepped forward one pace across the marble floor. Calm, controlled, unshaken. "You told me I did not belong here," she said quietly to Claire. "Now listen carefully." Every person inside Maison Étoile stood perfectly still. Naomi's eyes never left Claire's face. "You rejected the woman who owns this brand now." Dead silence. No gasps. No whispers. Just stillness so complete it almost felt physical. Claire opened her mouth, but no words came out. Brittany looked like she might cry. Daniel lowered his eyes completely. Madison slowly sat down behind the register as though her knees no longer trusted themselves to hold her upright. Naomi continued softly. "You looked at my clothes and decided my value. You saw a black woman dressed simply and concluded I was out of place in a building funded by people like me." Claire's voice finally cracked. "I did not know who you were." Naomi tilted her head slightly. That is exactly the problem. The sentence cut deeper than anything else she had said all night. Several customers nodded immediately. One older woman near the scarves whispered quietly, "That is the whole point." Naomi glanced slowly around the showroom. At the employees. At the customers. At the cameras still recording every second. "Respect that only appears after power reveals itself is not respect," she said. "It is fear wearing better clothes." Claire's composure shattered visibly after that. "Please," she said quietly, almost involuntarily. "This can still be fixed." Naomi looked at her for a long moment before answering. "You had 20 minutes to fix it." The boutique lights reflected softly against the marble while nobody dared interrupt the silence forming around them now. Then every employee tablet inside Maison Étoile chimed simultaneously again. Madison looked down first. Her eyes widened instantly. Brittany checked hers next and inhaled sharply. Claire slowly pulled her own company tablet from behind the counter with trembling hands. Across the screen appeared a single corporate notification stamped in black lettering beneath the Maison Étoile logo. Executive personnel access under immediate review. Claire stared at the message in complete silence while Naomi adjusted the sleeve of her coat calmly, as if the evening had finally become predictable again. One customer whispered softly into her phone while recording. This is the moment everything changed. And standing there beneath the gold lights of the boutique she now owned, Naomi Carter finally looked less like someone who had entered the wrong room and more like the future arriving exactly on time. Claire Whitmore stared down at the corporate notification glowing across her tablet screen as though the words themselves might rearrange if she waited long enough. Executive personnel access under immediate review. Beneath the message, her employee authorization status flickered yellow instead of green for the first time in 8 years at Maison Étoile. Around her, the boutique had become completely silent except for the faint piano music still drifting through the hidden ceiling speakers like a soundtrack, refusing to realize the movie had already changed genres. Naomi Carter stood calmly near the center display counter, posture relaxed, expression unreadable, while customers and employees alike looked at her with a completely different kind of attention now. Not suspicion, recognition. The shift was impossible to ignore. Brittany slowly stepped backward from the register again as another notification appeared across her monitor. Madison looked down at her own screen and inhaled sharply. Corporate is requesting all active employee badges for remote review, she whispered. Daniel Mercer reached instinctively toward the security badge clipped beneath his jacket, as though suddenly aware it might stop functioning at any second. Claire finally looked up from her tablet. "You are humiliating people publicly," she said quietly toward Naomi, but the accusation sounded weak now. Naomi tilted her head slightly. "No," she replied softly. "The truth is doing that." One customer near the handbags lowered her phone slowly. "That line was cold," she whispered under her breath. Another customer standing beside her nodded without looking away from Naomi. She never even raised her voice once. That part unsettled everyone most. Naomi had not shouted, had not threatened, had not demanded respect. She simply stood there calmly while the entire structure around Claire slowly collapsed under the weight of its own behavior. Then every employee earpiece inside the boutique emitted a sharp, synchronized tone. Brittany flinched. Daniel pressed a hand against his earpiece automatically, while Claire answered hers immediately. Whitmore speaking. A woman's voice filled the silence instantly. Crisp. Corporate. Unemotional. "This is Valerie Sutton from Executive Operations." Claire straightened slightly, desperate for control again. "Valerie, thank God. There has been a misunderstanding." Naomi looked away briefly toward the display windows facing Rodeo Drive, while Claire spoke faster now, trying to rebuild authority through explanation. The customer became disruptive and falsely represented herself during a pending investor. Valerie interrupted immediately. "Stop talking." The entire boutique froze. Claire blinked once. "Excuse me." Valerie's voice remained flat and cold through the earpiece loud enough for nearby employees and customers to hear pieces of every word. "We reviewed the footage already. Effective immediately, your management authority inside Maison Étoile has been suspended pending formal investigation." Claire's face drained completely. Brittany covered her mouth again. Madison slowly sat down behind the register counter in disbelief. Valerie continued without emotion. "You failed multiple conduct standards, escalated a discriminatory interaction, and compromised an active ownership transition involving the incoming majority stakeholder." Claire's lips parted slightly. "Incoming majority stakeholder?" Valerie paused 1 second before answering. "Naomi Carter." Nobody moved after that. Even customers who already knew the truth seemed stunned hearing it spoken officially by corporate leadership. Daniel slowly removed his earpiece entirely now. The movement was small, but final. Claire looked toward Naomi like she was seeing her clearly for the first time all night. Not as a customer, not as a threat, as power, real power. Valerie continued through the line. "You are instructed to surrender all managerial access immediately and leave the premises after transition security arrives." Claire whispered, You are firing me? Valerie's answer came without hesitation. No, Naomi Carter is. Silence crushed the room. Naomi finally turned back toward Claire calmly. That would be accurate. One customer quietly whispered, "Oh my God." Another slowly began clapping once. Then another joined. Then another. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just scattered applause rising carefully through the boutique, like people acknowledging something overdue. Claire looked around in disbelief as the room itself abandoned her completely. Brittany's tablet suddenly flashed red. Her employee access disappeared next. Madison looked down at her own screen quickly afterward, then back up in confusion. Mine is still active, she whispered. Naomi glanced toward her. It should be. Madison's eyes widened immediately. Claire stared at Naomi. You are keeping her? Naomi nodded once. She chose honesty while everyone else chose comfort. The sentence landed hard across the showroom. Daniel lowered his eyes briefly. Brittany looked ashamed enough to disappear into the marble floor. Outside the boutique windows, several people had already gathered on Rodeo Drive after noticing customers filming inside. Some pressed phones against the glass trying to understand what was happening. The story was spreading faster than Maison Étoile could contain it. Valerie's voice returned one final time through Claire's earpiece. Transition security will arrive in 3 minutes. Your access is terminated effective now. Then the line disconnected. Claire's company tablet emitted a soft tone before the screen suddenly went black. At the exact same moment, the gold employee credentials on her badge scanner turned red. Access denied. Brittany's badge followed 1 second later. Then Daniel's. The sound of failed authorization tones echoed softly through the boutique, like dominoes falling one after another. Customers watched in stunned silence while employees who had spent the evening deciding who belonged suddenly found themselves locked out of the very institution they thought protected them. Naomi adjusted the sleeve of her coat calmly before stepping toward the counter where the cream-colored handbags still rested untouched beneath the lights. Wrap those two for me, she said softly. Madison blinked once. Yes, ma'am. Naomi looked briefly toward Claire one last time. Not cruel, not triumphant. Just certain. You thought luxury meant exclusion, she said quietly. I think it begins with dignity. And standing there beneath the glowing Maison Étoile logo she now owned completely, Naomi Carter looked less like someone who had won revenge and more like someone who had rewritten the rules of the room itself. Madison Lee's hands still trembled slightly as she folded the cream-colored handbags into layers of black silk paper beneath the soft gold lights of Maison Étoile. The boutique had changed completely within the last hour. Employees who once moved with effortless confidence now stood quietly near the walls avoiding eye contact, while customers remained scattered across the marble showroom watching history settle into place one sentence at a time. Outside the massive glass windows facing Rodeo Drive, a small crowd had gathered beneath the glowing storefront sign, phones raised. Whispers spreading from person to person as clips from inside the boutique flooded social media faster than corporate public relations could contain them. Naomi Carter stood calmly beside the counter while Madison finished wrapping the bags with almost ceremonial care. Claire Whitmore remained near the center display case completely motionless, her employee badge still flashing red every few seconds against the scanner at her waist, as if the building itself no longer recognized her existence. Daniel Mercer quietly removed his security jacket and folded it over one arm. Brittany stared blankly at the dark monitor in front of her where her employee credentials had vanished entirely. Nobody knew what to say anymore. The illusion was gone now, not just inside Maison Étoile, but inside themselves. Naomi glanced briefly toward the windows where camera flashes flickered faintly from outside. It is spreading quickly, Madison whispered carefully. Naomi nodded once. Truth usually does once people stop protecting comfort. Madison looked down at the wrapped handbags before speaking again. I am sorry for what happened tonight. Naomi studied her quietly for a second. You spoke when staying silent would have been easier, she replied softly. That matters. The words visibly affected Madison more than any corporate promotion ever could have. Near the fragrance counter, one older customer slowly approached Naomi, holding her phone at her side now instead of recording. May I say something? She asked gently. Naomi nodded. The woman hesitated before speaking. I watched everything from the moment you walked in. She glanced briefly toward Claire. And the worst part was not the insults. Naomi remained silent. The woman swallowed hard. It was how normal everyone acted while it happened. The sentence settled heavily through the boutique. Brittany lowered her eyes immediately. Daniel looked toward the marble floor. Even several customers nearby shifted uncomfortably because they understood exactly what she meant. Discrimination rarely announced itself loudly anymore. It survived through silence. Through people deciding discomfort was easier than intervention. Naomi looked around the showroom one final time. At the polished counters, the gold logos, the expensive lighting designed to manufacture exclusivity. Then she spoke softly enough that everyone inside instinctively listened. Systems like this survive because too many people convince themselves they are only watching. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody here used slurs tonight. Naomi continued calmly. Nobody screamed. Nobody threatened me. You simply questioned my presence, my worth, my right to belong. Quietly, professionally, elegantly. Claire closed her eyes briefly after hearing that word. Elegantly. Because she finally understood how transparent the performance had always been. Naomi continued. That is what modern prejudice looks like now. It smiles while it excludes you. Silence wrapped around the boutique again. The customers filming earlier no longer looked entertained. They looked reflective. One younger man, near the watches, slowly lowered his phone entirely and whispered, "Damn." Madison handed the finished shopping bags carefully across the counter. Naomi accepted them with a small nod of appreciation before reaching into her coat pocket one final time. Her phone vibrated almost instantly, as though the company itself was already learning her rhythm. Olivia Grant answered before the second ring completed. "Everything is finalized," Olivia said smoothly. "Ownership transfer documentation clears at opening bell tomorrow morning. Press inquiries are already overwhelming communications." Naomi glanced once toward the windows where the crowd outside had nearly doubled. "I expected that." Olivia paused briefly before continuing. "There is one more thing. Several board members asked whether you intend to replace the current customer inclusion policies company-wide." Naomi looked slowly around the boutique again. At Madison standing quietly behind the counter. At Brittany still staring downward. At Daniel holding the folded security jacket in silence. At Claire Whitmore finally understanding the cost of deciding who deserved dignity based on appearance alone. "Yes," Naomi replied calmly. "Effective immediately." Olivia's voice softened slightly. "I thought so." Naomi ended the call and slipped the phone away again. Then she turned toward the front entrance. The crowd outside shifted immediately after seeing her move. Camera flashes flickered against the glass. Madison stepped forward instinctively. "Ms. Carter." Naomi paused. Madison hesitated before asking quietly, "What happens to this place now?" Naomi looked back across the showroom slowly. The marble floors. The display lights. The employees. The silence. "That depends," she said softly, "on whether luxury finally learns the difference between exclusivity and respect." Then she began walking toward the entrance. Nobody stopped her. Nobody could. As Naomi passed Claire, the former manager finally spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong." Naomi stopped briefly beside her, but did not turn around immediately. The entire boutique held its breath again. After a long second, Naomi looked at Claire calmly. "No," she replied quietly. "You were honest." The sentence landed harder than anger ever could have. Claire's eyes fell toward the floor. Naomi continued walking. Daniel stepped aside and opened the glass door without a word. The cool Beverly Hills night air rolled softly into the boutique, carrying distant traffic sounds and the glow of Rodeo Drive beneath the city lights. Outside, dozens of phones lifted instantly the moment Naomi stepped onto the sidewalk, carrying the two cream-colored handbags wrapped in black silk paper. But Naomi did not wave. She did not smile for cameras. She simply paused beneath the glowing Maison Étoile sign, now belonging to her completely, and looked back once through the glass storefront where everyone inside still stood frozen in the aftermath of what they had witnessed. Then she spoke one final sentence quietly into the night. "I did not raise my voice," she said. "I raised the standard."